Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm your host, Kevin Benedict, and I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited for this particular episode because Amisha Gandhi is here and joining us today, and we've been trying to do this for a while.
I'm really excited to be here, Kevin. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, if you haven't met Amisha before, she's the Vice President of Marketing and Communication and was instrumental in founding the SAP Global Influencer Program. So we're going to dig into that and just find out what that all means. So you also have an advocacy role in part of your responsibility. Why don't you start there and just let us know what that means?
So when you think about advocacy, it's really, who are your brand? People have affinity for your brand. And so we look at it as our customers. They are most important advocates and influencers as well as our customers.
Yeah.
And then also, SAP is a very large company, and we have over 100,000 employees now. So our employees are also our advocates. So when you're thinking about how do you want to not, it's not just about getting your message out.
Yeah.
The great thing about advocacy, it's a two-way conversation that other people are having on your behalf because they really love your brand or like something you're doing or had a really enjoyable experience or unique experience, and they're sharing it with their audience.
Oh, yeah, I see that represented every day when I go to LinkedIn and I see a thought leader within one of the different groups at SAP. They post something, and then I see all the other leaders and all the other kind of people involved that have kind of a public facing. They're all sharing it.
Yeah,
and so
and
they're all advocating the
that's
same
right.
kinds of missions and purposes and videos and all that.
Yeah, and even if someone is not an executive, but they have a voice in the market or they have an opinion to share, they can do it. They can add into the conversation, which is what's really great about that kind of advocacy.
Now, let's talk about influencer marketing. A lot of us hear that. We might read that in the consumer-focused media, and it's always about Instagram influencers and things like that. But in this context, we're talking about B2B kind of industry influencers. What's that mean in the SAP world?
So when you look at influencer marketing for B2B, it's very different than B2C. In B2C, it's more commoditized, it's pay by post, it's really headed in the way of advertising. B2B influencer marketing is not all about scale. It's more about the quality of the relationship. And really, to look at it, you want to define what influencer marketing is. And there's two different definitions depending on what you're trying to do. One is more influencer relations. And those are external influencers, whether they're analysts, thought leaders, academic authors like yourself, that people want to work with, and they have large social networks, right? So those are more in social media realm, and they're writing blogs. So when you're working in that way, it's more influencer relations because it's more about awareness and marketing. When you think about influencer marketing, the marketing piece of it is really how do you work with these influencers? So these are people who have large active networks, either online or offline, or they're well-known in an industry or well-known for a topic, and they have these active networks. And then you're looking to engage with them to reach their audience and also reach yours. So you can expand your audience, you can speak to your audience that's already existing in a different way through these folks and with these folks. And you can help drive measurable business results. And so that what I mean is you're getting into the funnel. You're doing lead gen, you can do demand gen, you can do nurture, and then you can eventually get to advocacy with your customers. And when you put it like what I call in a blender, customers, employees, external influencers, and you throw it up against the entire marketing, the customer journey actually, that's really the true power of influencer marketing.
Wow. So I've had the privilege of kind of witnessing the development of the global SAP's Global Influencer Program. How has it changed? If you think back to when you first started, what were you doing then that's kind of evolved and changed since then?
Sure. So influencer marketing is very interesting because this started about maybe 6 years ago. So we were going to Mobile World Congress, and I said, let's do some videos. And I believe you were there for that too.
Yep.
So thanks for joining us for that ride. And we did 40 videos and put it out, over some social, and they did much better than just videos that we did on our own. And that got me thinking about the idea of how do we work with influencers more in co-creating content and wanting to do more. And then eventually, it became a program, and we did a pilot with our CIO IT group. And we brought together influencers like yourself. We went to Sapphire, which was our first, a big annual, that's our big annual conference. We bring everybody together in Orlando, 20,000 people. We invited 11 influencers, including you. And we did some videos, but we also created some campaign materials. We did interviews and grabbed that, turned it into ebooks and other kinds of long-form content that we could put into our marketing campaigns. And that's how influencer marketing was really born at SAP, and it was about 4 or 5 years ago. So that's a little bit early for B2B, and it's still early days for B2B because people are still figuring it out. And I think a lot of people do the top funnel stuff, which is awareness, which is the blogs, the coverage, the social. But the value is when you get into co-creating content and it's on your website, or you're drawing traffic to your website, you're drawing eyeballs to where you are, but in a very in a way that you're giving back something. So you're giving away knowledge. It's education based. You're offering advice and counsel from a third party, and you're not just talking about yourself, but you're really adding value. And so that value hopefully carries over when you do webinars with an influencer, or whether you do some ABM on influencer content or in-person activities with customers and influencers, right? And I think real success comes when you tell your customer stories alongside an influencer, and you're not even in the content. You're not, it's just the customer and the influencers together telling a story, and you're kind of in the background. And that tends to drive a lot of either traffic, eyeballs, or ROI. And it really creates engagement, because that's where you want to get to, is the engagement piece with the audience.
So 6 years on, SAP is still investing in influencer marketing and the programs and all this. How do they measure that? Where do they find the value, and where do they recognize the value?
Yeah, I mean, as marketers, we're always asked about, how does this help the business? Yeah. It's great to get leads, it's great to, but how are you really helping my business? So first you want to figure out what, we look at it and we say, this is the business outcome, right? If it's awareness because it's a product launch, then you want to do a lot more of the top funnel activities, which is videos and blogs and other kinds of content that you can drop in LinkedIn and Twitter tend to work better in B2B over, Instagram and things like that. And those are still good, but we see more results from like the LinkedIn and the Twitter that we do. And then you're really looking at, okay, so that's great. That's top funnel engagement. We got the awareness out. And how do we drive people down, right? So you can do an ebook on your website and draw people there, and your influencers can do it, and we get a good organic reach out of this. And then once people come there, you can even do gated content with influencers. So, you can get everything from website traffic to time spent to who's coming. And if you do gated content where people have to give you their email address, then you're getting who they are, a little bit more specific information, and then you have a way to follow up with them. So you can start with a webinar. You have an ebook, then they sign up for the webinar. Now you have their information, and then you can follow up and say, thanks for coming to our webinar. And oh, by the way, here's a podcast series that you might be interested in, right? So you can create all these different kind of digital content journeys, because somebody may come in on the webinar, somebody may come in on the ebook. So what you want to do is get people involved. So you're looking at the same metrics you would for any marketing campaign, and then you're just looking for that added lift.
Got it. So for the marketers out there, let's talk about how you organize this. Does every line, there's SAP must have hundreds of lines of business or different products or categories of products, market segments, all this. How do they kind of organize their global influencer program? Is it just a few at the top or a few groups, or does everybody get involved?
So as time has evolved, so I started the program, and after about 3 years, I moved over recently to Ariba and Fieldglass to help them start their influencer marketing program on the Cloud Business Group, and someone else took over the global program. But there are people in the company now, more and more marketers are interested in doing the influencer marketing piece. So we have a centralized function where relationships are managed and also events. And then we look at each group and we all stay connected to each other so that we can, share what's happening. So we're not bringing one influencer to 5 events. We also share relationships and things so that people can know who's working with whom, but also what was the result of that. And then there are a lot of cross-collaborative programs that we can do. And then we work individually in our lines of business also, because sometimes the topics can become very niche. For example, Ariba, we focus on procurement, Fieldglass on external workforce, and then there's Concur, right, which is more travel and travel.
Yes.
Procurement. So those are specific audiences and specific people trying to reach. And then if you look at IT at SAP, right, or something else, or HANA, then you want to reach more of a CIO audience, a CTO audience, or CXO audience with experience coming in.
Right.
So then we tailor programs to that. And then there's, different ways we can piecemeal out a piece of a global asset.
So interesting. So again, for the marketers out there, talk to us about how you go about planning a year. Is it based around events, themes, just how do you kind of approach it?
So when you really think about it, you have to think about what is your business objectives for the year. So right now we're in planning phase at Ariba, Fieldglass. Everyone is in planning phase right now. We're heading into the holidays. So everyone's looking at their budgets, but they're also looking at more of what they want to achieve. You want to take a look back. What worked, what didn't work. So this was our first full year at Ariba, right? So, and the Fieldglass doing influencer marketing. So we take a look back and say, this worked, this didn't work, what could have worked better? Which influencers really engaged with us? So, over time, people will be more invested in you or less invested in you and vice versa. So, it's really a two-way relationship, right? So you figure out which relationships and who's going to go with you as your program is maturing. But then you look at what are the business outcomes and themes for next year? And how do we play there? What works? So we know this ebook and we did a podcast series this year, and it's still going. And it's getting even stronger. So we're thinking about, okay, what does wave 2 look like on that? When people come and they download the podcast, let's have something pop up that says, oh, now we have an ebook. Would you like to see it? So we want to keep people engaged. So we're trying to find those things. So you want to look at your business outcome. You want to see what are the mechanisms, what are the marketing campaigns going on? Because we're not doing things like, oh, here's the influencer marketing campaign. It's more like, here is the business outcomes, here's the marketing campaigns, and the things that marketing is going to help and support sales and the business itself. So you plug into that. So, we have a procurement campaign going on. So we're going to do another wave of the podcast series. But like I said, we have an ebook now. How do we marry that up? And they also have a study. So then let's see where we can modify the content so they fit like puzzle pieces together.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So that's where the planning, we start at the top level. You start on themes. You start figuring out who you're going to work with and what that looks like. And then keep it flexible enough, because once you start talking to your influencers, the topic or the angle might shift because they're telling you, here, that might not work for your audience. What I'm hearing on the street is people really want to talk about AI, and they don't really want to talk about blockchain. I mean, whatever it is, right? They'll help you make the adjustments you need to make your program really successful. And when people are invested with you, then they want to share it, but they also have ownership of it too, right? So you're not just saying, come here to say this. We never would do that, because then it's a parrot. And we could do that on our own. We're not looking for that, right?
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be authentic either.
There's a lot of people that'll be watching this that are interested in influencer marketing in their own technology company. So since you have this wealth of experience, what advice would you have of how you would start in the first 3 months? What would you even look at if they wanted to start an influencer program inside their own company?
So when you think about starting a program, I didn't start with a full-scale program with, a few hundred influencers. It doesn't work like that. It takes time, because you have to find out what works for your company and for your business objectives, because I don't always just do a podcast series. I don't always just do an ebook. I don't always do a webinar. It depends on what it is that you're trying to achieve. So let's say, you have a product launch coming up, right? And that's pretty simple and easy or an event coming up.
Yeah.
Those are things that are top level funnel and good ways to figure out who your influencers are going to be and how to start engaging with them lightly before you jump in full feet first and you do something big, and then you look back and say, well, why didn't that work, right? So when you look at your program, you say, for example, when I started the IT pilot, we wanted to launch and have more awareness about, IoT, for example, right? So you want to take that topic and how does it apply to a CIO audience? Who are the people talking about these things? And then you do your research. So we use a tool called Tracker. I use Google Lists at first because took us time to get Tracker in place and things like that. So you want to see who's writing, who's, even in social, who is being invited to conferences, which influencers. You'll start seeing certain influencers kind of migrate in different groups. What's the engagement on their channels? Like, are people, commenting, or is there conversations happening? And then you can say, okay, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's a topic. Here's a business objective. It's awareness. So, and we have this event coming up, Sapphire. That was our big thing, right? So we said, okay, we're going to focus on this vertical, and we're bringing these folks. We're going to do some live stream videos. That's what we decided to do. And also some non-live stream videos, because not everybody that we spoke with, customers and influencers alike, were comfortable with the live stream. So we did that. We worked with everybody. We did some prep calls just so people knew each other. But when you reach out to your influencer, you don't have a fully baked program. So I reached out to these influencers in the first few weeks. I found out some people, started talking to them and saying, tell me a little bit about you and tell me how you like to work with brands. And I said, I don't really have an agenda. I'm just starting a program here.
Yeah.
Let's talk and see, what you've experienced, what you're interested in, and what we're trying to do, and where we intersect. And those are the conversations that happen. And I had a couple of those, and we figured out, okay, out of the 10 people I talked to, probably 7 would be a really great fit, and they wanted to be involved. And 3 of them were, they said, we don't do this kind of thing. And we're not interested, right? And that can happen too, and that is okay, because you want people who want to work with you, right? But you also have to, if you go in, when I've gone in and said to an influencer, oh, we're doing this program, we have this campaign, I think it's more off-putting because we've already made up our mind. We're saying, we're doing this. Do you want to fit in this box?
Yeah.
And I think it's much better when you say, how do you work with brands? Because that will tell you which program they would fit into. And if it's not this one, then it could be another one. So that's how I would approach it, is do a lot of research, do a lot of vetting with the people that you're going to be talking to, and then do something small like a pilot, like what we did at Sapphire with like 10 influencers on one vertical, and then see what your success rate is. And then, now you have some relationships going forward, and you start developing a core group of influencers. Then you'll start developing some assets, and then you'll start developing some experiences, and it will all build on itself over time.
Thank you for sharing that. If we look forward and I get your futurist hat,
Right.
and you put on your futurist hat, how do you think if we could look forward, let's just say 2-3 years?
Okay.
How do you think influencer marketing for business-to-business environments will change?
So I think we're just getting started, and I think it's an uptick. Everyone's talking about it in B2B more so than when I started, right? It was like, hello, and no one was, it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Now I think people are seeing the value. They're taking some of the lessons from B2C, not the bad ones, but the good ones, and saying, okay, how do we apply it to B2B? We have a much longer sales cycle. So I think people are going to start thinking about in 2020 how, we get out of just awareness for other companies, right? They'll start thinking about that. Then I think the other big thing is this communities of influence. When people do influencer marketing, it's external influencers. I think we need to start thinking about communities of influence. So who are those? Online, offline, your employees, your customers, your partners, and putting them all together. And that's kind of what I've done at Ariba. It's like, let's put these together and see what happens. And that's what we've done this year. And we able to get deeper in the funnel and have more meaningful, not only meaningful content and not in more engagement, but we're able to have better business and deeper business results. And so when I look forward to that, I think of it, communities of influence, how they comes together, and you could even create an online community of these folks, right, eventually. And that's not a new idea, but I think these groups coming together and companies kind of intersecting what this all means, and then applying it to customer experience. And once you get the data from customer experience, taking a look at it and working with your community of influence to kind of help you deliver better experiences, more feedback. I think it's going to get a lot deeper in B2B. It's going to go to the communities of influence. And I don't think it's going to be influencer marketing anymore. I think it's going to be influence marketing. So that could take in PR and anything that have different influences digitally or not digitally on your customers. As we get more experience driven, I think that's where we're headed. It's about experiences. It's about influence. And so I think influencer will become influence marketing because there'll be lots of other types of influences involved.
Bold prediction, a wealth of information. Thank you so much, Amisha Gandhi, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Kevin Benedict, for having me on.
And I want to thank you guys for joining in.